So in this tutorial, we will be doing a summary of the lesson evaluating the possible impact of effective and less effective managerial supervision on the service provided for users and the professional development of a counsellor. So this is for educational purposes only. And we'll start with, well, what is managerial supervision? Well, managerial supervision is carried out by a supervisor with authority and accountability for the supervisee. It provides the opportunity for staff to review their performance, set priorities in line with the organization's objectives and service needs, and identify training and continuing development needs. And that's not exhaustive, but that's an overview. Now, think for a moment when you've had, now an exercise we'll do now, take a moment and you can write this down or make a mental note or come back to it later. Think of a time where you've had managerial supervision and think of some of the activities in managerial supervision you've experienced and how it's impacted you and your clients, how it's impacted your development as a counselor or psychotherapist. Have a moment to think about that. You can come back to it later if you wish. But let's focus now on effective managerial supervision. Well, effective managerial supervision, well, it should help the trainee or the counselor to improve their counseling skills or the service they provide within the requirements of the organization. So managerial supervision is not necessarily formally arranged like casework supervision, where you formally arrange a time or day and a frequency. So managerial supervision is not always formally arranged as such, although it can be useful to schedule managerial supervision, which can be initiated by the trainee or the counselor and the manager of the organization. So you can sort of possibly email them or contact them, or maybe they vice versa. And that can be useful. So one sort of, something to sort of think about, it can be quite useful to the manager to sort of give you some guidance on how to use even like technicalities, phones or computer equipment, just general technical issues within the organizations, be it photocopy machines, be it Zoom, be it Teams, how to manage a contract as such over a phone, what to do in the environment you're in. So for example, if you leave the therapy room, what you need to do is any sort of housekeeping necessary, notes, how to ensure any notes you take are transferred to the counseling agency securely, using equipment, possibly a secure system like the cloud, or maybe storing in a safe with lock and key. So these are sort of general logistics that can be useful, that a managerial supervisor can really help the trainee or the counselor. And it's good practice, by the way, for the manager to check in with the counselor, the trainee, to see if there's support they require. So even an email or a quick call, or even just dropping in and is everything okay, and do you need any assistance with anything, or you're clear on everything, so to speak. And it's also good practice for the manager to be in contact with any CPD opportunities that become available. That could be a specific area of interest, obviously within the context of the service provided, or just generally could be some CPD that could be as part of the remit of the trainer, the counselor, that might be useful for them. CPD could be a range of different areas that can cover, but that can be useful if you've got a manager who can suggest that and maybe provide details of CPD, whether it's sort of refresher safeguarding, or whether it's a mental health first aid, whether it's just general CPD in terms of communication, or if there's an extension to or sort of the remit, within the remit of the sort of counsellor trainee, there might be some new information. So that can be quite useful for the manager to keep on top of that. It's good practice for the manager to support the trainee or the counsellor in the way of contact. It's really important that there's always a dialogue, you know, an open door policy, to use a metaphor where, okay, the manager should always, you know, might be times that they're not available, obviously, through one reason or the other, but generally speaking, that, you know, they are able to make time for the trainee or the counsellor. Provide useful suggestions. So, for example, you might have a trainee who hasn't used psychometric tests before, or they're using it for the first time, and they've been trained in, say, PCT, and this might sort of be, you know, world away for some people. They might not be used to doing that, and that could be, you know, that could be discussed with the case supervisor, absolutely, but it could also be discussed with the manager. And that can be useful too, because, you know, you can get you can talk about that, how to implement that, the importance of them as well. And I think equally, it's really important to get feedback. You know, how you doing? You're a trainee, and how are things getting on? You know, feedback from clients. You know, feedback from the organisation. So you can call it like an appraisal, for example. It's quite useful to know. And the flip side to that, less effective manager supervision, well, it would be, you know, the opposite that we talked about, being effective. So it would be not providing any feedback. So sometimes sort of, you know, leaving the trainee or the counsellor in the dark, so to speak, about how they're managing day to day. You know, communication, obviously no communication, poor communication. So it could be, for example, that, you know, send an email and it's not replied to in due course, with the exception, obviously, you know, well, away people are busy and they've got schedules, and there could be a break or whatever, but there's no sort of protocol in place for getting back. That wouldn't be good, obviously, because that would sort of hinder potentially the trainee or the counsellor to fulfill the requirements of the agency. And potentially a breakdown in communication could lead into breaching policies and regulations for the agency, because obviously you need to be clear. You need to know. And as you go along, there's certain things you can cover in CPT and workshop and whatever, but you're not going to be able to cover everything, we would think. So, you know, I think it's sort of, you know, really important, sort of, you know, communication, you know, making time for the trainee, or the counsellor, to make sure that sort of, you know, they're up to date with policies, they're up to date with any sort of changes as well. So if there are any changes, for example, it's really important to sort of inform the counsellor trainee as soon as possible. And I suppose we saw an example of that, you know, when we had the pandemic and things were changing. At times, even, well, on a periodical basis. So obviously, in terms of, you know, what needed to be done, or in terms of, you know, whether sessions went on Zoom or electronically, or through, you know, how the adaptations were to be made, or so. Just, that's just an example, by the way. It's not exhaustive. I'm sure you can think of other things as well. But, you know, the consequences of not communicating could lead to anything from sort of a data breach, you know, managing paperwork as well, and obviously important that the sort of counsellor trainee understands that, you know, that they behave professionally, and they've got the guidance and the protocol in place for that organisation, and also stay within the remit of their competence. So there's sort of things that, as a consequence of, you know, poor casework supervision, might arise. I'm sure you can think of others. These certainly aren't exhaustive, but it gives you a bit of an idea of some of the implications of that.